Hello everyone, welcome to our e-lecture. Today the subject of our e-lecture is the verb, and we will discuss in details about the grammatical properties and the features of the verb. Our e-lecture consists of 5 layouts. Today we will discuss the problems of generality characteristics of a verb as a part of speech, classification of English verbs, the category of voice, tense, and aspect. And of course, there is a recommended list of literature for the e-lecture as an additional, but you can have it. Grammatically, the verb is the most complex part of speech. It performs the central role in realizing predication connection between situation in the utterance and reality. That's why the verb of primary informative significance in an utterance. The verb possesses quite a lot of grammatical categories. Furthermore, within the class of verb, various subclass divisions based on different principles of classification can be found. Semantic features, morphological, and syntactic features. Let us discuss about the semantic features of the verb. The verb possesses the grammatical meaning of verbality, the ability to denote a process developing in time. This meaning is inherent not only in the verbs denoting processes, but also in those denoting states, forms of existence, and evaluations, and etc. Morphological features of the verb. The verb possesses the following grammatical categories: tense, voice, person, aspect, mood, number, posteriority. The grammatical categories of the verb find their expression in synthetical and analytical form. The formative elements expressing these categories are grammatical affixes, inner inflection, and function words. Some categories have only synthetic forms, that is the person and number, and others only analytical. It could be voice. There are also categories expressed by both synthetical and analytical forms, such as mood, tense, and aspect. The most universal syntactic feature of verbs is their ability to be modified by adverbs. The second important syntactic criterion is the ability of the verb to perform the syntactic function of the predicative. So any verb in the form of the infinitive can be combined with the modal verb. And according to different principles of classification, the classifications can be morphological, lexico-morphological, syntactical, and functional. So let us discuss the morphological classifications of the verb. According to the esteemed types, all verbs fall into simple, sound replacive, stress replacive, expanded, phrasal. Simple is all the verbs like to go, to run, to jump, to speak, to sing. And sound replacive, the food, to feed, blood, to bleed. And stress replacive, there are several samples: import, to import, transport, to transport. Expanded with the help of suffixes and prefixes. Justify, cultivate. Composite, overcome, corresponds to composite nouns, to blackmail. And phrasal is to have a smoke, to give a smile. So they always have an ordinary verb as an equivalent. According to the way of forming past tense, the participle verbs can be regular and irregular. Regular productive suffixes and irregular non-productive means root vowel change, suppletion, and unchanged forms. Lexical morphological classification is based on the implicit grammatical meaning of the verb. And according to the implicit grammatical meaning of transitivity, in transitivity, verbs fall into transitive, and intransitive. So that is basically ability of taking objects. Transitive, these are verbs combined with direct object or prepositional one. And intransitive verbs expressing emotions, state motion, position in a space. And according to the implicit grammatical meaning of stativeness, non-stative verbs fall into stative and dynamic. And according to implicit grammatical meaning of terminativeness and non-terminativeness, verbs fall into terminative and durative. So this classification is closely connected with the categories of aspect and phase. Syntactic classification of the verb is according to the nature of predication. Primary and secondary, all verbs fall into finite and non-finite. So let us look at the description of the finite verb. So how we can define the finite verb? Finite verb act as the main verb and can be changed according to the noun. And finite verb used only in present and past tense and can be indicative, a passive or active voice, and also of a number, singular or plural. While non-finite form of the verb cannot be main verb, as they do not talk about the action and the being performed by the subject or noun. Non-finite form of the verb do not indicate any tense, mood, or gender. And non-finite form of the verb used as a nouns, adverbs, and adjectives. And used to form non-finite clauses, which are simply dependent clauses that use non-finite verbs. There are three types, and these are gerunds, infinitives, and participle 1 and 2. According to their functional significance, verb can be notional, functional, and functional its own terms divides into link verbs, modal verbs, auxiliary verb. Notional verbs, which has the full lexical meaning of their own, as write, go, see, jump, come, send, build, sing, sang, and etc. And functional link verbs to be, am, is, or was verb. So link verbs are used as finite form of the verb. They are part of compound nominal predicates and express voice, tense, and other categories. Modal verbs express mood and tense since they function as a part of predicates, as it's brought in our table, the sample. Besides, in present-day English, there is another group of verbs which are called auxiliaries. They are used to form analytical form of verbs. Jack will be singing it. Or the next sample, does he singing now? Or as a sample, I have never read. The form of the verb may show whether the agent expressed by the subject is the doer of the action or the recipient of the action. That is the category of voice. The objective relations between the action and the subject or object of the action find their expression in language as a grammatical category of voice. And therefore, the category of voice reflects the objective relations between the action itself and the subject or object of the action. So the category of voice realized through the opposition, active, passive voice. And the realization of the voice category is restricted because of the implicit grammatical meaning of transitivity and intransitivity. In accordance with this meaning, all English verbs fall into transitive and intransitive. So here you can see in the table samples of the intransitive verbs, which will make sense without one. Intransitive verbs used in the causative sense are called transitive verbs. And transitive verbs requires an object. and in the form of a noun or pronoun to complete its meaning. So transitive verbs are used with the direct object. And here's some sample and a table that you can look at. Transitive verbs can be classified by the number of objects they require. However, the classification turns out to be more complex and comprises 6 groups. Verbs used only transitively, verbs the main transitive meaning, verbs of intransitive meaning and a secondary transitive meaning. A lot of intransitive verbs may develop a secondary transitive meaning, like for example, the left me into agreement, or he danced the girl out of the room. And the 4th group, verbs of double nature, neither of the meaning or the leading one, and the verbs can be used both transitively and intransitively, like in the simple to drive home or to drive a car. And the 5th group is the verbs that are never used in the passive voice. These are to seem, to become. And the 6th group, verbs that realize their passive meaning only in the special context, like the verb live, to sleep, to sit, to walk, to jump. The category of tense is a verbal category that reflects the objective category of time. And the essential characteristic of the category of tense is that it relates the time of the action and the event or state of affairs, which referred to into the sentence to the time of the utterance. And the tense category is realized through the opposition, present, past, which is binary principle of opposition, remains the basic one in the correlation of the forms that represent the grammatical category of tense. The present moment is the main temporal plane of verbal actions. Therefore, the temporal dichotomy may be illustrated by the following graphic representation, and the arrow shows binary. Present, past, future, present, future, and past. Generally speaking, the major tense distinction in English is undoubtedly that which is traditionally described as an opposition of past and present. But this is the best regarded as a contrast of past and non-past. Quite a lot of scholars and grammarians do not recognize the existence of future tense, because what is described as the future tense in English is realized by means of auxiliary verbs will and shall. Also, it is undeniable that will and shall occur in many sentences that refer to the future. They also occur in sentences that do not. They do not necessarily occur in the sentences with the future time reference. So that's why future tense are often treated as partly modal. The category of aspect is a linguistic representation of the objective category of manner action. And it's realized through the opposition, continuous, non-continuous, or progressive, non-progressive. So the realization of the category of aspect is closely connected with the lexical meaning of verbs. There are some verbs in English that do not normally occur with progressive aspect, even in those contexts in which the majority of verbs necessarily take the progressive form. And among the so-called non-progressive verbs are the verb to think, understand, to know, to hate, love, see, taste, feel, possess, own, and etc. And the most striking characteristic that they have in common is the fact that they are stative. They refer to a state of affairs rather than to an action, event, or process. And it should be observed, however, that all the noun progressive verbs take the progressive aspect under the particular circumstances. As a result of internal transposition, verb of non-progressive nature can be found in the continuous form. Now I'm knowing you. And generally speaking, the continuous form has at least two semantic features: duration and definiteness. Duration means the action is always in progress, and definiteness, the action is always limited to a definite point or period of a time. In other words, the purpose of the continuous form is to serve as a frame, which makes the process of action more concrete and isolated. Thank you very much for your attention. And as an additional, you can look into the recommended literature. For now, that's all. Thank you and bye.